Hi, I'm Valeria Popov. I reversed my gestational diabetes, got off insulin, lost weight, and sustained my weight loss for 2.5 years now. I got rid of my allergies and constant constipation. And I did it by transitioning to a plant-based, exclusively whole food lifestyle. And I want to show you that it's possible for you too to get healthy. Today, I'm interviewing Dr. Howard Jacobson, and we are going to be talking about overeating and binge eating. Welcome, Dr. Jacobson.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for your time and being here with us today and willing to share your knowledge. Would you please introduce yourself and what you do for people who are not familiar with you?
Sure. So I'm Howard Jacobson. I'm a doctor in terms of I have a PhD in health studies. So I'm not the sort of doctor you want on a plane with somebody's, giving birth. I am a health coach. I've written books about nutrition, co-written books, and my real interest is helping people implement what they already know to become healthier. Because right in the internet world, there's a way like we can binge learn, right? We can just watch one video after another, watch another documentary, get another book, and all the while substitute learning for actually putting things into practice. And I guarantee you, if you've never read a single book on nutrition, there are things you're doing that you could be doing differently, you could be doing better, you could be doing more of, you could be doing less of, and that's where I focus my attention and my skill set on helping people to gain traction to achieve things.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your dedication to human health and supporting people in overcoming some very hard moments in their life. Please, would you explain us the nature of binge eating and overeating?
As I understand it, let's start with binge eating. Right? It's essentially when you eat something that you don't want to eat, or you eat something, you eat an amount that you don't want to eat. So overeating is a subset, right? So it's basically, it's very confusing for people. It's like, well, I don't enjoy this anymore. Why am I doing it? Or I know I'm going to be sick in 10 minutes. Why am I doing it? Or I'm kind of happily full right now, and I know that this is going to give me heart disease if I eat it, or it's going to make me fat if I eat it. Why do I keep doing it? So to me, the idea of the binge is that there is simultaneously in that moment two drives: the drive to stop, to not do it, to cease, and the drive to continue. And they both exist in the same person. And everything else is sort of variation, like which one's on top, how hard are they fighting with each other? What do you do when you hear those two voices fighting? What contributes to the situations that lead to that binge? What makes you more vulnerable, right? Everybody knows there are times in their life where it's easy to say no, and there are other times where the slightest, the smell of cinnamon could make you go to the airport and get 12 butter pretzels or something, right? So that's how I think of binge eating. It's an activity that will give us some degree of pleasure, but often a degree of discomfort or pain in the moment, and only negative consequences down the road.
Got it. Yes, thank you. Would you please share why is it happening to people?
There are many factors. There are many reasons. I'd say one of the main ones is stress. So we live in a culture in which stress is rampant, and de-stressors are not readily available. So if we were living way out in the savannah, the stressors would be the crackle of a twig and the smell of a tiger, right? Or a storm that we had to get away from or get shelter from, or a neighboring tribe. They would be intense moments. We would activate our fight or flight. We would deal with the threat or die, and then we would be surrounded by nature. We would see the rippling of water in a pond. We would hear the rustling of leaves in a tree. We would see nighttime vistas. We would have tribal rituals of dancing around a fire that would all serve to reduce our stress. We live in a society now where stress is constant, it's chronic, And when you're under stress, physiologically, you are prepared for danger. And if you're prepared for physical danger, you want calories, and you want them in calorically dense packets. You don't want to be incredibly full of broccoli. You want to have, the energy sources that'll give you the power to successfully fight or flee. Another aspect of that is that under stress, we live in a society in which people are very lonely, right? So people who are lonely binge more than people who are not lonely. And I'm not talking about like an evening in, you didn't get to go out. I mean, people who feel socially isolated. So in these days, I don't know for how many years people are going to be watching this video, so I hope this is going to be the bad old days pretty soon. But with COVID, there's a lot more social isolation, a lot more loneliness, a lot more binging. And the reason I just discovered this, I just finished a book about sort of pro-social habits and the biology of them, is that when you are lonely, you're basically separate. Your body thinks, I'm separate from my tribe. I'm out in the savannah by myself where it's dangerous. And one of the things I need to do is constantly be on the alert. So when you're lonely, you're actually stressed out because anything that comes at you is not going to be your mommy or your sister or your kid. It'll be a stranger or a strange animal. And we're constantly under stress for that as well. And you don't know when you're out in the world, you have no idea where your food's coming from. It's not like you're with your tribe digging up the roots. Catch as catch can. Whenever you see food, you eat food. That's what you do when you are separated from your tribe in the savannah. So for all the people who think, well, what's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? There are physiological reasons based on stress, based on a lack of social support. And there's also the addictions, right? I don't know people who binge on broccoli and brown rice, right? I know people who binge on Ben and Jerry's and pretzels and plant-based, cereals with maple syrup and nuts and things like that, right? We binge on foods that excite our palate, that produce immediate hits of dopamine. There's a lot of research that I'm not that familiar with about the mechanics of like chewing and sucking in terms of soothing behaviors. But if you think about, like, it just makes sense, like a baby at the breast. Well, we want those muscles to be working because that's connected to nourishment, to maternal warmth, to closeness, to skin contact. And so I think for a lot of us, just the feeling of eating, using our mouths in that way can be very soothing as like mommy substitute. And I can't give you references on that. I've read a little bit, but it feels like for a lot of people who talk about it, and in my experience, the physicality of chewing feels important as well.
Yes, and actually it's very interesting that you just mentioned it. Well, I want to share that I used to overeat, and actually Dr. Jacobson coached me on it. And this is something that I discovered during the session, that I really enjoy chewing and swallowing. And I think that's what you just talked about, that this chewing and swallowing, it's a comfort motion, I guess. But it's very interesting. So Dr. Jacobson, do you believe that to overcome binge eating or overeating, we first have to deal with the stressors, the stress, or is there another ways?
So ultimately, I think we have to deal, or I would say we get to deal with things, right? So this is a way in to the wonderful improvements in our life. But the issue is, in the moment, we are overeating or binge eating because of a feeling that we don't want to feel, right? There's a sensation, there's an emotion, there's a thought pattern, and eating kind of gets us a little bit high. And so it's like when if you're listening to someone complaining and moaning and you turn the radio up really high and you're listening to your song, they're still complaining and moaning, but you just don't hear it as well, right? But when you turn the radio back down, they're still there. So that's, in essence, in the moment is what we're doing. So you could certainly work with psychotherapy to say, like, well, where do these feelings come from? How can I explore them? How can I resolve them? However, the easier way the problem with that is if the problem is the voice, And it's not your friend complaining or whining, but it's something inside you complaining and whining, right? There's a negative constellation of feelings, thoughts, emotions inside your body, and those are what you're drowning out. How can you work with them in a therapeutic session if you don't know what they are? If you refuse to hear them, if you refuse to be present with them? So for me, the first step is set some boundaries on your binges so that you learn step by step in a very, very safe way how to begin to tolerate what is causing you to overeat. So let's say, okay, you can eat whatever you want. Just when you get that urge for a whole pepperoni pizza, wait a minute and breathe and pay attention to your body and see what comes up. And gradually over time, the more you do that, the longer you give yourself, the more you set up parameters and boundaries, you discover that that having a preference and acting on it are two different things, right? So very often when someone's talking about, well, I had to eat it, I'll ask them, do you love your job? And even if they say yes, is there any days you didn't feel like doing your job? You didn't feel like getting up and going to work? Are there any days you don't feel like doing the laundry? Are there any days you don't feel like paying bills? And people, of course, all the time, there are things that I feel like not doing, but I'm conscientious, so I do them. And then they go, oh, right? So I can apply conscientiousness to my binges. I can create space. I can create rules around those binges. Maybe I can't stop eating a whole pepperoni pizza, but maybe I'll stop at half a pizza. And even at that moment, there's a choice point, there's a decision point, and there's space to begin to explore what's underneath. So you can, like, the first step for me is stop binging and then use the space you've created to do whatever deep, meaningful work you want.
Yes, thank you. Can you share with audience some tips? You already started to do that. There's some tips and strategies that they can use today to start overcoming the binge eating or overeating.
Right. So identify something you're doing, some binge you're doing on a regular basis, whether it's a time of day, like I always eat at 9 p.m., or a situation, I always overeat when we go out with these people, or a particular food, I have trouble saying no to potato chips, and decide what you want your relationship with that situation or social group or food to be. What would you ideally like to be doing in that situation instead of what you're currently doing? So now you've got a gap between current reality and desired reality. And then just make a rule for yourself or set a standard that is some small step on the way. So let's say I don't want to eat after 9 p.m. So maybe, and you find yourself eating at 11. So say, well, I'm going to stop at 11. Because whatever you do, the most important thing is to understand that you have the control. It's different from 12-step, in which we're saying, I give up control. This is saying, I am choosing control. And so, or let's say I have a 6-pack of soda a day habit. Go to 5. It doesn't matter, but because there's going to come a moment after you've had your 5 where you're going to want the 6th, and that's where you get to practice. So choose something that is on the path that you would bet on yourself. Like, be that confident. Like, you'd bet a painful amount of money that you can do it. And in the moment, when you feel the urge, simply pay attention to your body and notice what sensations come up for you. And they're not going to be pleasant sensations. They're not going to be sensations that you're going to want to, cuddle with. They're going to feel like, oh, a lump in my throat. They're going to feel like pressure in my chest. It's going to feel like butterflies in my stomach. It's going to feel like tension in my back. It's going to feel like maybe the beginning of a headache on the back of the occipital ridge. That sensation is the thing that you are trying to escape from by eating. So creating the space to feel it, and no one has ever felt it and said, this is so intolerable, I can't handle it. They say, this is awful. They say, I wish I wasn't feeling this. And after they go through it, they're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I handled it. And just so to be able to, it's like the monster is under your bed and you're too scared to look, The moment you look under your bed, it loses its power. So that's what we're trying to do by creating the space with a rule and then allowing yourself to be present to what happens to your body.
Oh my God, I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for sharing it. Any last encouragement or support for people with binge eating or overeating situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of practical things you can do, like have other things to eat, have other go-tos. Like the problem with binge eating is it's what we call a dead man's goal. Like anything a dead person can do better than you is going to be a limited goal, right? A dead person will never binge, right? So instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to not binge, create a plan to do something positive. 11 p.m., I'm going to go upstairs with a glass of water and a book, right? There's a positive action rather than withholding a negative. Rather than inhibition, I'm going to, like, inhibition is really hard, but doing something else that's incompatible with the behavior I'm trying to extinguish is much easier. So instead of having a beer when I go out with my friends, I'm going to have seltzer with lime. Right? When the server comes to take our dessert orders, I'm going to ask for fresh fruit and tea. Right? So the rules should be positive and not just, I'm going to not do this thing.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and willingness to share it with people.
Oh, well, thank you for the people you're reaching, for everything you're doing, and for, so openly sharing your own story, your struggles, and your successes. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.